Name's Tom Marlowe. If you're returning and have been at some of our previous webinars, thanks for joining us. I'm joined today by Heather Bennett-Spurk, Director of Operations with Harness IP, who's going to be talking a bit about how this topic applies in their internal operations, and Adam Reese, who works with me as an IP automation specialist lead, and he handles a lot of the automation, configuration, setup, and planning that we do here at Black Hills. All right, let's jump in. So I'm going to start a bit at a high level here before Adam and Heather take over with the more interesting content. This is just a little foundational material. So as we all know, there are plenty of steps in the day-to-day of an IP workflow. There are pieces requiring expert knowledge, creativity, and then there's steps that are pretty mundane, maybe moving data from one place to another. But there are a lot of steps that typically have complexity and variability in what may be processed on a daily basis. There's different activities, say for different countries, different things that are done for different matter types, different filing types, matter statuses, and so on, right? The processes and workflows that live within our firms or corporate legal departments are critical because they guide how we handle these things as they occur in order to make sure that nothing gets overlooked or missed, which is really important. Having good process is what allows us to best leverage our skills and expertise. So it's obviously worth paying attention to as the field gets more and more competitive. At a high level, IP process starts with an input. Now, this could be a correspondence, a communication, something that needs to be initially processed. Processing here really entails determining what the thing is, how do we handle it, what data do we need, dates, numbers, names, that type of thing. The next step is integration. This is a fancy word for putting data into a system, like a docketing system or a DMS. This could be manual, it could be programmatic, all depending on kind of how modern your docketing system is. Once this is complete, typically there's some sort of report, confirmation that the thing was docketed, and then scheduling of alerts that tell us when there's an upcoming deadline and starting of another workflow, right? So along this process, there's also in this lower box, peripheral processes that can be triggered from the use of that data in the workflow above. Now, I think it's important to recognize that an IP process can be just this simple if you look at the way you operate with respect to these boxes. And when you do that, you can start to see where points of congestion emerge. So basically, we look at where does the work get very manual, where is the data tricky to obtain, and understanding these pressure points can help identify areas to improve. Okay, so we've got a lot of boxes here. I'm going to try to stay high level and just quickly break these things down. I'm not going to go into each and every box. But here's where we really want to tie into this webinar where we're going to be talking about CPI and where it fits in the process. So at this point, we've got activities at the front end, like scrape of correspondence from the USPTO, email receipt of docketing communication, foreign agent portals like the HANU portal that Black Hills provides. Getting data is not always simple or reliable, depending on your source, but it's important, really important, because everything else flows from here. once you have that communication, we need to figure out what it is. It seems simple, but it's quite complicated to do it very well. And as we all know, in the legal IP field, doing things very well is extremely important. So, extensive rules, modern AI models, this kind of technology exists to make these types of determinations quickly. We found these determinations need to be made quickly and with an extremely high level of confidence. So, good enough is not good enough in this field. When you're setting up automation, it's important to make sure that you aren't automating imprecision. There's a lot of, I think, what they'd say, devil in the details in IP. So it's important to make sure that your tools can determine those details. Now, of course, sometimes human review is needed when automation is stumped, but these days it can be very time consuming and inefficient to rely solely on human review for each piece of the process. Anyway, so now once we know what a document is, and we have all the relevant details, and we know how to deal with it, it needs to get into the docketing system. In this case, we're talking specifically about CPI. Thankfully, CPI has a nice, clean interface, which includes APIs for pushing data in electronically. We've worked with some of the older systems like R8 and prior, where there are APIs, and the newer systems, CPI R9 and 10, which have even more modern APIs. They've been really great to work with and help get data into the systems reliably and quickly. And the beauty here is that you've got manual input and keying kept to a minimum or eliminated. Now, this increases speed, improves quality, and reduces cost in the docketing process. That's the trifecta, and it's really dependent on those APIs that CPI is able to provide. So the data goes in, dockets are created, files are stored, say in a DMS if you have those running alongside, and reporting can take place to all the stakeholders that are involved. And then below here in the lower part on the periphery, the data through the process from the docketing correspondence to what goes into CPI or what's generated out of CPI can be used to drive analytics, automated response shells, or other workflows that might be needed in your practice. Okay, so enough of that high level. I want to hand things over here to Adam to share some knowledge about how that automation works.
Thanks, Tom. I want to start off by going over some CPI definitions. These are going to be useful for considering what goes into automating your processes and how best to do so. Some of this will be review for experienced CPI users, but hopefully there'll be some useful information as well. At a high level, CPI has action types, which are the templates of the system. These are specific to countries, or there are sometimes generic templates. CPI will ship with a set of action types, but usually what we find is users will configure additional action types to accommodate their needs. Each of these action types have two important features: the due dates and the follow-ups. When you add an action type for a docket event, you're going to be adding a base date, which will be used to calculate all of the due dates, so individual kind of line items associated with the action type. These can be due dates, final dates, reminder dates. CPI is very flexible in that regard in terms of what you need it to contain. And then the follow-ups are additional due dates that will appear or can be configured to appear when an action is closed. So say you file a response to something and you want to launch another due date, perhaps a status check or something similar. That's where follow-ups can come in. These action types and their due dates can have remarks, so free text comments associated with them. And typically that's where we find remarks are best placed if there's a need for them. Sometimes there are a lot of remarks added, but we like to kind of think about what sort of value they're actually adding as well. You can also put remarks at the application level, so in the matter itself. Those can be tricky to work with because of the free text nature of the field. So generally, we can add a lot of remarks for you, but trying to predicate updates based on remarks can be fraught. Finally, there are country law actions, which are, as they sound, actions which launch due dates based on bibliographic updates. So, you enter a issue date and renewals launch, things like that. Next slide, please. So what Black Hills does is work with you to map documents from patent offices, which we maintain a comprehensive library of, to whatever CPI updates correspond to those documents. Typically, that takes the form of adding or closing actions or due dates, or updating relevant bibliographic fields, or triggering supplemental IDS workflows, or a combination of those. It may even be that you need multiple action types in your CPI system to cover a single document, and that's another place where we can assist with automation. There are often kind of additional customizations and edge cases that need to be accounted for, and we can usually take care of those as well. That's where maintaining a knowledge of your internal docketing processes and related processes that can trigger off of that is critical to implementing automation. We need to know what you do so we can replicate it for you. As we review these processes, we will help to identify best practices for docketing and automation, such that you can optimize your processes and empower your staff to work on other complex tasks, and you can make decisions based on the data that's available rather than a gut feeling or anything like that. Heather can now speak firsthand to their experience with automating CPI through Black Hills.
Thanks, Adam. Well, to really explain our decision making and going forward with automation, we have to go back a little bit. We won't go back too far, but we do have to go back to pre-pandemic. And our decision to automate docketing predates my current role as director, and credit to those with the forethought back in those days, probably around 2018, is certainly due. I would say that collectively we started talking about auto docketing for our mid-sized firm back around 2018, maybe even 2017. And fast forward to 2020, the pandemic forced many of us into streamlining, including transitioning to a completely paperless environment in a matter of days. And again, we started buzzing about auto docketing around that same time, but we had some pretty big in-house hurdles to conquer, including but not limited to moving to an entirely new CPI platform. Next slide, please. So first, we're going to do a quick overview of our why. I think it's best to establish your why before starting any project, big or small, professionally or personally. Your why is always going to be your North Star when things get difficult, and things always get difficult. Our why includes, but is certainly not limited to, the following: expanding the skill set of our current docketers, more reliability obtaining mail from the USPTO, fast turnaround times, and some semi-automation of triggering events. I'll expand on each of these near the end because I think it will help tie everything together. Next slide. So before Black Hills AI, we had some in-house processes in place, of course. We had several semi-automated workflows, including downloading our incoming USPTO correspondence. At that point, we were using a software application to download incoming correspondence from the PTO. And while this process was much faster than manually downloading, it was still pretty clunky, and we could only download a few customer numbers at a time. We regularly experienced issues with the USPTO making back-end changes, something I know that we can all bond on. And sometimes the software broke, and then we had to wait for a patch. And this sometimes took days, and sometimes it took weeks, and it forced us to scramble to figure out an easy way to download what typically amounts to hundreds of pieces of correspondence on any given day. Then we still had to process everything in CPI, report the actions to the attorney teams, and then we went through and verified every single piece of correspondence. Next slide. So next we have the reliability of the USPTO deliverables. If you were in IP a few years ago, I'm sure we can trauma bond over the week that the PTO just broke, all of it, everything, and it was right before the holidays. Recovery from this took weeks. If at that time we had Black Hills AI auto docketing services, our recovery time would have been hours instead of weeks. This incident was one of many driving forces. Then there's the trickle down. Our incoming USPTO correspondence, the downloads create triggering events for other internal teams. Most importantly, our accelerated client services team. So if we don't have deliverables, our teams can't start their reporting. Attorney teams start sending emails to us asking where their reportings are, and then we're putting out a bunch of fires, and this puts everyone behind schedule. So when one process breaks, everything dependent on that process breaks as well. So the topic you're here to hear about is CPI automation. So we have a very highly customized version of CPI. Not only do we have firm-specific customizations, we have customizations by client and by office. With any web-based product, getting real-time data can be challenging. We rely on data drops for the latest data. Throughout the day, CPI sends us automated data drops so we can run reports, push data into different areas, and so we have the best and latest information at our fingertips. Black Hills AI and our internal IT team worked closely with the team at CPI to ensure a smooth transition into auto docketing. Each morning, Black Hills AI pushes the actions into CPI and throughout the day if needed. Black Hills sends an email to the appropriate attorney team with each action and the docket dates. The email appears to be from our internal team. If there's any discrepancies in the PDF deliverable that Black Hills scrapes, they automatically note in the email that there is a discrepancy, where it's found, whether it's the title, the inventors, or something like that. Any reporting emails with the discrepancy automatically copies our internal docket team, and we'll work with the attorney team to update CPI. This is particularly helpful for OFRs. We receive a file of all of the PTO correspondence, and our IT group has automated functions that import those deliverables into the Matter workspace in our DMS. Black Hills also delivers a spreadsheet listing all of the actions that they docketed or touched over the last 24 hours, since sometimes the PTO posts things late in the day. We use that spreadsheet to spot check and keep track of all of the incoming correspondence. If there is an issue, Black Hills will notify us that the auto docketing is running late that day. It doesn't happen often, but this notification is very helpful for all of our teams, and it helps manage expectations. The decision to onboard with Black Hills Auto Docketing Services was a no-brainer, but it did require a lot of work. The main thing you have to ask yourself is, why not employ a service to scrape your customer numbers and report incoming actions to your attorney teams? Easier asked than done, I'm sure. I won't lie, implementation was a lot of upfront work, but it was 100% worth it. The hardest part was creating the action maps. We are fortunate to have several long service team members who fully understand our entire docketing process. They understand CPI and they understand action mapping. It did take an inordinate amount of time to create the action maps, and we are still filling in the gaps when we get those USPTO oddities. But we'll have those action maps forever, and we'll never have to recreate that wheel. Next, we move on to testing. For my own peace of mind, we went through a test phase. This was about 2 weeks, and this enabled us to get used to the deliverables, figure out if we had any gaps in our internal processes and in-house automated functions, and ensure all bases were covered. This phase was crucial for us, and it really helped our docketers get used to what we were going to see going forward. So what about trademarks? That always seems to be the last question, doesn't it? So anyone in IP knows that trademarks are often left behind when thinking about automation, process improvements, etc. So what about them? There's some great features that the USPTO's trademark system provides, one of my favorites being emailing signature links. But downloading incoming actions is not one of those features. To address this, we use another semi-automated process to get trademark mail over to Black Hills. It includes some auto-forwarding rules and some quick steps. And all of this is done with Outlook. Trademarks are typically processed within 24 hours. So never underestimate the power of Outlook and the macros and quick steps you can do within Outlook. It's a very powerful program. Our folder in Outlook is, we simply drop the trademark mail and it automatically forwards to Black Hills. So it's a quick step to drop the mail into the folder, and the piece of mail automatically goes over. And it's real easy, and there's no manually moving or anything like that. So right now we're over a year into this auto docketing, and I couldn't be more pleased with the results, and the rest of the firm seems incredibly happy as well, especially with how quickly they get their actions. With Black Hills AI, and assuming the patent office is properly functioning, we have our daily actions in CPI, usually by 8 a.m., and the attorney teams log in and usually have their action reporting emails waiting for them in Outlook. The PDF deliverables are usually in our DMS via another automated process by 10 a.m., enabling our internal teams to scrape and start client reporting. So now back to our why, and this isn't on a slide right now. I just want to revisit and kind of expand on some of our whys and how they kind of make sense after going through the automation process. So the first why was expanding the skill set of our current docket staff. As anyone in the IP docket field knows, despite popular assumption, IP docketing is not data entry. It's unraveling puzzles, figuring out complex families, deciphering instructions from both in-house teams and external teams. At Harness IP, we have a very robust group of US and international docket processors across 3 of our 4 offices, and we manage almost 150 customer numbers with the USPTO. We have maintained a 24-hour turnaround time for US action processing for several years. Now with Black Hills, we have been able to reallocate some of our processors to other in-house roles. We have also been implementing a strong cross-training program in IP operations, expanding the skills of our already amazing team. Automation can be scary for in-house teams. Expanding the skill set and cross-training has helped alleviate the perceived threat of AI and automation. Humans will always be needed, especially in the highly specialized world of IP. Next, More reliability of obtaining PTO mail. Oftentimes, the PTO emails reporting that day's correspondence are late. Prior to Black Hills, we would wait for those emails before performing our semi-automated scrape because we didn't know which customer numbers we would need to scrape. Now, Black Hill takes care of the scrape for us, and there's no waiting for those PTO emails. Next is the fast turnaround times. As mentioned before, Black Hills report out emails typically hit our inboxes well before we log in each day, which is a lot quicker than our previous 24-hour turnaround time. And last is the semi-automation of triggering events. Before we went live, and even after, our IT team worked closely with Black Hills on our deliverables. We dropped the deliverables straight into our DMS with no human intervention. So in addition to the emails that the attorney teams receive with their action and docket dates, the accompanying PDF is already waiting for them in the DMS. We use the DMS search folders among many of our teams, and we use those search folders, and they're scraped for other in-house processes. There's no waiting for other in-house teams to do something like save to the DM. And that to me is a win-win situation. And that's all I have.
All right. Thanks so much, Heather. I gotta say it. I absolutely love the focus up front on the why to get everything and everyone aligned, kind of at that value level. Geez, this is a great strategy for any project, but especially one as complex as IP automation and process. And for all of our folks listening, if there's any takeaway from this webinar, boy, I would urge you to take note of that one. It'll definitely pay off. If we have any questions here, feel free to drop them in. I see a question that just came up. When you say save to the DM, is it a specific DM or any? Are there limits on the connections? Heather, what do you use or have you seen from a document management system perspective?
Our product, do you want the product that we use?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
We use iManage.
Okay, yeah, and we've got other firms that we've worked with that use iManage or NetDocs, or some docketing systems have the document management integrated into them. So it runs the gamut. And so I think in this respect, Heather was talking specifically about iManage, but it could be any kind of a system. All right. Let's see. I've got another question here for Heather with respect to CPI and customizing things. Any tips or tricks on doing those customizations?
My recommendation is that you have an in-house expert for customizing CPI. You have to have someone who really understands the ebbs and flows of your firm, your office, or your client. It really depends on what the customization is. And then you have to have a great project manager over at CPI that you can work with and bounce questions off of. But it's really your in-house experts, and we are very fortunate to have a couple of those who I get to work closely with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen a lot of situations where the value of having that in-house person that knows your docketing system and is the go-to on kind of the ins and the outs, it pays off a lot. They tend to become very useful folks. Let's see. We've got a question about, do all CPI systems have APIs? I think I can cover this one. I think generally the answer is yes, or they have the capability of it. I'm not sure that we've seen or worked with ones older than like R7, so I don't want to necessarily speak to those, but that would be a pretty old system at this point. But like an R8 system, they have older what we call SOAP-based APIs, which we've worked with CPI over the years to get to where they are, so that we can have fully functioning comprehensive integration. The newer R9 and R10 have a more modern, what you call REST API. And they're pretty slick, very quick to set up. And so I think generally the answer is yes, they do have APIs. It just might depend on the age of your system. Let's see. Okay, we got another question here on country law, which is, does CPI have US and foreign country law, and how often do you typically see updates?
Yeah, it has country law, and as to how often, it just depends on when things change. Again, this is for your in-house experts. So we have an in-house expert who gets all of the country law changes and goes through and reviews everything and then pushes them into the system. And then they also determine, how those country law updates should be distributed to the firm, or if they need to be distributed to the firm and to the attorney teams. So it's all in your in-house experts.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Let's see. We do have one question here. It's not exactly docketing system related, but what is your assessment of using AI for searching past patents? So I assume this is for prior art type of thing. I'll answer that real quickly. I would say use it. Prior art searching is such a nuanced field that any place where you can get some advantages in terms of speed and time is going to be helpful. So I think it's a very useful tool. I wouldn't hesitate to use it in a second. All right, let's see. I got a couple more. Give me a second. Okay, so we've got a question. This might be tricky, but let's see if we can cover it. What is the average manual time savings by using this auto docketing tool? For example, if a docketing department has 5 people, how much time could be reduced with the automation? That's a good question. I guess maybe Heather, do you have any thoughts on, since implementing the docketing automation with Black Hills, how much it's allowed you to reallocate some of that personnel to other tasks?
Well, it's been pretty significant. I mean, I've not done any time studies on this yet, but
Sure.
I'm certainly willing to, and I love a good time study and a good spreadsheet. So,
Nice.
but I would say, we have like I said, we have a pretty robust group of docketers, and we have, with the automation, we're able to move them around and plug them in to other crucial roles. So, and one of those being like intakes, for instance. It's always hard, for a mid-sized firm to have a huge group of like people doing intakes. But with automation, that's allowed me to use people who should be doing intakes, and that's our docketers, because they're experts in this. I've been able to allocate a lot of their time to intakes now. So I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself, you know, with one piece of correspondence or a day's worth of correspondence from the patent office. So, you know, depending on how many actions on average you're receiving a day, how long does it take your staff to process that? What's your turnaround time? If it's, you know, is it 24 hours? Is it 12 hours? And then you have to compare that to, you know, walking in and having all of your docketing done for the day before, like, right after you log in. So, you know, those are just kind of a couple things you need to look at for your specific team.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I particularly love that question and answer from Black Hill's marketing perspective, because it's one of the benefits that we definitely push. But I like the point that you're making as it allows you to not only kind of be able to reallocate those resources, but the speed in which it happens, you know, I guess exceeds what the people would have been able to do in that same role anyway. So it's almost like you get a double benefit, right?
Absolutely. And I do think it's important to stress that and I said it in my presentation, but humans are always going to be needed. There's going to be human-centric tasks all the time. So, especially in what we do in putting families together and doing research and you know, unraveling some of these puzzles and unraveling some of these email requests that we get, we're always going to need human intervention.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Okay, so here's a question. Templates were mentioned at some point. Are the templates standard in CPI? Did they auto-generate, or does a user request them? Oh, here's an example. If a non-final comes in, the document is scraped, docketed based on its due base date. Does a shell for a response auto-generate or quit it and save to the DMS? Oh, okay. I think maybe I can answer this, because it's more about the front end with respect to templates. Templates meaning like shells. I think that's the question. And the answer is yes. So Black Hills does provide that for especially office action responses, where after the scraping happens, we determine what it is. Okay, it's a non-final office action. Pull all the details off of it, including grabbing current set of claims, the rejection types, all that information, and then can populate the key data into a office action response shell following either a standard template, or maybe there's a template that a firm already has. And then that just gets delivered in with the report out. So here's the office action, here's the references and the claims, and here's a response shell that would come along with it, ready for editing. I think that answers that one. Oh, I like this one. Not necessarily a question, but this comes from Jim here at Black Hills, our CEO. He wanted to note and provide a congratulations, Heather, to you and your team at Harness for rising to number 6 on the Harity ranking of firms by patents issued in 2023. So congrats, nice work. That's
Hey, thanks. I will pass that congratulations along to our shareholders.
All right. A couple of questions about, do we integrate with sync IDS prior art management? I'm not sure if we've done a sync IDS integration yet, but we have a team that is dedicated to doing integration, because every time we work with a new firm or a new company, whether it's Harness or and any other out there, there is we plan for a period at the front end where we're going to be doing some integration work. Any system, especially any system that's got an API for communication, we are able to work with. If the systems don't, we've worked with a lot of other companies and docketing system and ancillary systems to work to get those integrations in place. So even if we haven't done one in the past, it's it's part of what we do. We're constantly doing that type of development. Okay, I think we might be getting to the end of the questions here. And we're almost at our 45 minutes anyway. So, all right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And of course, a special thanks to Heather and to Adam for sharing their experience and your insights with us. It's been a pleasure. It's always fun to hear about how your operations work, and how you utilize the automations and process efficiencies.